By the time World War II began, Japan possessed the most experienced carrier force in the world, not just in ships, but in doctrine, training, and coordination. While other navies still treated aircraft carriers as support units, the Imperial Japanese Navy had already reorganized its strategy around massed carrier aviation. From the world's first purpose-built carrier to ambitious late-war conversions, Japan's carrier fleet evolved rapidly, often under extreme pressure. Some designs pushed naval aviation forward. Others revealed the limits of industrial capacity and strategic planning. In this video, we'll walk through every Japanese aircraft carrier used during World War II, in strict chronological order, examining what each ship was designed to do, how it was actually used, and why it mattered. As we go, notice which design choices aged well, and which ones may have quietly sealed Japan's fate. If anything surprises you, or you think something deserves deeper debate, keep that thought in mind. Early purpose-built and experimental fleet carriers, 1922-1933. Hōshō, 1922. Hōshō, Hōshō, holds a unique place in naval history as the world's first aircraft carrier designed and completed from the keel up for that role. Though small and lightly armed, Hōshō allowed the Imperial Japanese Navy to experiment with deck operations, arresting gear, and coordinated air launches at a time when carrier aviation was still theoretical. Its limited aircraft capacity made it unsuitable for frontline combat by the late 1930s, but its value lay in training pilots and refining procedures that later carriers would rely on. Akagi, 1927. Akagi began life as an Amagi-class battlecruiser before the Washington Naval Treaty forced its conversion into an aircraft carrier. This unusual origin gave Akagi a large hull and high speed, making it suitable for fleet operations once its early multi-deck flight layout was replaced by a single full-length deck. By the 1930s, Akagi had become a core strike carrier, serving as a testbed for massed air attack doctrine that would define Japan's early war successes. Kaga, 1928. Kaga, converted from a Tosa-class battleship hull, followed a similar treaty-driven path but with different design compromises. Its heavier armor and broader hull improved survivability but reduced speed compared to Akagi. Early multi-tier flight decks proved inefficient, leading to major reconstruction in the mid-1930s that transformed Kaga into a true fleet carrier. By the eve of World War II, it operated as a frontline unit, pairing substantial aircraft capacity with hard-earned operational experience. Together, Hōshō, Akagi, and Kaga formed the experimental backbone of Japanese carrier aviation. Their gradual evolution, from tentative experiments to fully operational strike platforms, allowed Japan to enter the war with confidence in carrier-led naval warfare, long before most rivals had reached the same conclusion. Pre-war fleet carriers. First-generation strike corps, 1937–1941. Sōryū, 1937. Sōryū represented Japan's first attempt to design a fast, modern fleet carrier without the constraints of treaty-era conversions. Built for speed and offensive power, it sacrificed armor protection in favor of aircraft capacity and high operational tempo. This reflected Japanese doctrine at the time, which prioritized striking first and decisively. Sōryū's design allowed it to operate closely with fast battleships and cruisers, reinforcing the idea that carriers were now central, not auxiliary, to fleet action. Hiryū, 1939. Hiryū was an improved and partially redesigned companion to Sōryū, incorporating lessons learned during fleet exercises. Its distinctive offset island improved aircraft handling and deck efficiency, while modest internal changes enhanced damage control. Though still lightly armored, Hiryū was slightly more survivable and operationally flexible. These refinements made it one of Japan's most effective carriers during the opening phase of the Pacific War. Shōkaku, 1941. Shōkaku marked a major leap in Japanese carrier design. Larger, faster, and better protected than earlier ships, it balanced offensive capacity with improved survivability. Designed without treaty limitations, Shōkaku carried a powerful air group capable of sustained operations and benefited from superior aviation fuel storage and deck strength. This made it well-suited for extended fleet actions rather than short, decisive strikes alone. Zuikaku, 1941. Zuikaku, Shōkaku's sister ship, entered service with identical capabilities but a very different wartime trajectory. While technically equal, Zuikaku's survival through early battles meant its air group was often depleted even when the ship itself remained operational. This highlighted a growing problem for Japan. Replacing skilled pilots proved far harder than replacing steel, limiting how effectively even advanced carriers could be used. Together, these 4 carriers formed the backbone of Japan's early war striking force. Their design philosophy emphasized speed, coordination, and overwhelming first strikes, an approach that achieved dramatic results but left little margin for prolonged attritional warfare. Light fleet carriers and fast support carriers, 1941-1942, Ryūjō, 1933, Ryūjō was conceived as a light fleet carrier under treaty displacement limits, resulting in a narrow hull and stability issues from the outset. While fast and capable of operating with the main fleet, its limited aircraft capacity and weak protection restricted its combat effectiveness. Ryūjō nonetheless served as a valuable operational platform during the early stages of the war, demonstrating both the utility and the risks of aggressively lightweight carrier design. Zuihō, 1940. Zuihō originated as a submarine tender, before being converted into a light aircraft carrier, reflecting Japan's growing need for flexible aviation platforms. Its compact size limited sortie rates, but its modernized flight deck and efficient aircraft handling made it useful for fleet support roles. Zuihō was often employed to supplement larger carriers, extending reconnaissance coverage and reinforcing strike packages when available. Shōhō, 1941. Shōhō, also converted from a submarine tender, entered service with similar limitations but played a more direct combat role. Lacking armor and defensive redundancy, it was vulnerable to concentrated air attack. Its loss at the Battle of the Coral Sea underscored how lightly built carriers, while valuable numerically, could not withstand sustained enemy strikes without robust protection and fighter cover. Jun'yō, 1942. Jun'yō was converted from a passenger liner originally intended for commercial service. This civilian origin imposed structural limitations, but its large hull allowed for a respectable air group and good endurance. Jun'yō often operated in secondary fleet roles, supporting major operations rather than leading them, reflecting how conversion carriers were integrated pragmatically into Japan's broader naval strategy. Hiyō, 1942. Hiyō, Jun'yō's sister ship, shared similar strengths and weaknesses. While capable of frontline service, mechanical reliability issues and limited damage control reduced its operational consistency. Together, Jun'yō and Hiyō filled an important gap during a period when Japan could no longer rely solely on elite fleet carriers, highlighting a shift from quality-first doctrine toward necessity-driven force expansion. These light and support carriers illustrated Japan's attempt to balance speed, numbers, and operational reach. While they increased fleet flexibility, their vulnerabilities revealed the growing mismatch between Japan's strategic ambitions and its industrial realities. Escort and convoy protection carriers, 1941 to 1944. Taiyō, 1941. Taiyō began life as a passenger liner before being converted into an escort aircraft carrier, reflecting Japan's late realization that convoy protection and training roles were becoming strategically essential. Smaller and slower than fleet carriers, Taiyō carried a modest air group primarily intended for anti-submarine patrols and transport missions rather than offensive strikes. Its limited speed prevented it from operating with fast carrier task forces, but it filled a growing defensive gap as Allied submarines intensified pressure on Japanese supply lines. Unryū, 1942. Unryū, converted along similar lines, expanded on Taiyō's escort role with slightly improved aviation facilities. It was frequently used to ferry aircraft, pilots, and supplies between the home islands and distant theaters. While capable of limited combat operations, Unryū's true value lay in logistical support, an unglamorous but increasingly vital task as Japan struggled to maintain cohesion across its far-flung empire. Chūyō, 1942. Chūyō, the largest of the 3 escort carriers, demonstrated both the potential and the vulnerability of these conversions. Despite a reasonable aircraft capacity for its class, it lacked effective damage control and underwater protection. Chūyō's loss to submarine attacks starkly illustrated the dangers facing slow-moving carriers operating without adequate escort, reinforcing how air power alone could not compensate for structural and tactical shortcomings. Collectively, Japan's escort carriers represented a reactive shift in naval priorities. Built too late and in too small numbers, they attempted to address convoy defense and training needs after Allied dominance at sea had already begun to solidify. Their service history reflects a Navy adapting under pressure, often one step behind the evolving realities of modern naval warfare. Late war emergency and mass production carriers, 1944-1945. Unryū, 1944. Unryū was the lead ship of a simplified carrier class developed as Japan's industrial situation deteriorated. Based loosely on the earlier Hiryū design, Unryū emphasized faster construction over refinement, resulting in reduced armor, simplified machinery layouts, and limited endurance. Although intended to restore Japan's depleted carrier force, fuel shortages and a lack of trained aircrews meant Unryū never operated as a fully effective combat carrier. Its existence highlighted how carrier construction alone could no longer reverse Japan's declining air power. Amagi, 1944. Amagi, a sister ship to Unryū, reflected further compromises imposed by material shortages and constant Allied air pressure. Construction delays and incomplete outfitting prevented Amagi from entering active service before being damaged in air raids while anchored. Despite possessing a theoretically capable flight deck and hangar arrangement, it never deployed operational air groups, illustrating how strategic collapse could neutralize even newly built warships before they ever fought. Katsuragi, 1944. Katsuragi, was the most complete and operationally successful of the Unryū-class carriers. Built with reinforced structural elements to resist bombing, it survived multiple air attacks and remained afloat until the war's end. However, like its sisters, Katsuragi lacked aircraft, fuel, and pilots, reducing it largely to a defensive or transport role. Its survival owed more to circumstance and construction resilience than to combat effectiveness. These late-war carriers symbolized Japan's final attempt to rebuild carrier strength through standardization and speed. While technically sound in concept, they entered service at a moment when air superiority, logistics, and trained manpower had already slipped beyond recovery. The result was a fleet that existed more on paper than in practical combat capability. Special conversions and strategic anomalies, 1944. Shinano, 1944. Shinano was the largest aircraft carrier ever built during World War II, and one of the most unusual. Originally laid down as the third Yamato-class battleship, its conversion into an aircraft carrier followed Japan's catastrophic carrier losses in 1942. Unlike fleet carriers designed to launch large strike waves, Shinano was conceived as a support carrier, intended to resupply other carriers with aircraft, fuel, and ordnance, while also operating a limited air group of its own. This hybrid concept reflected a Navy struggling to adapt its strategy under severe pressure. Despite its immense size and thick armor protection, Shinano suffered from critical flaws caused by rushed construction. Many watertight compartments were incomplete, crew training was inadequate, and damage control systems were unfinished when the ship was commissioned. These weaknesses proved fatal. Just 10 days after entering service, Shinano was sunk by a U.S. submarine while still en route to final outfitting. Its loss demonstrated that scale alone could not compensate for poor readiness, incomplete systems, and eroding operational discipline. Shinano stands as a powerful symbol of late-war Japanese naval strategy. Ambitious, technically impressive on paper, but fundamentally undermined by time constraints, industrial strain, and the loss of experienced personnel. Rather than restoring carrier strength, its destruction highlighted how far Japan's carrier force had fallen from its early war dominance. Japan entered World War II with a carrier fleet that was not only technologically advanced, but conceptually ahead of its time. Early investment in carrier aviation, realistic training, and massed strike doctrine allowed the Imperial Japanese Navy to achieve a level of coordination unmatched in 1941. Purpose-built carriers and well-executed conversions gave Japan a powerful, flexible striking arm that reshaped naval warfare in the opening months of the Pacific conflict. However, the same system that produced early success contained critical weaknesses. Carrier designs emphasized offensive reach over survivability, while pilot training prioritized elite skill without scalable replacement pipelines. As losses mounted, new carriers entered service without experienced aircrews, fuel, or adequate support. Late-war construction programs produced ships faster than Japan could produce the conditions needed to use them effectively. By 1944, Japanese aircraft carriers still existed in name and number, but not in function. Industrial strain, logistical collapse, and air superiority shifted decisively against them. The arc of Japan's carrier force, from world-leading innovation to strategic exhaustion, offers a clear lesson in modern warfare. Dominance depends not just on advanced platforms, but on sustainable systems behind them.